The shocking death of a wealthy Texas businessman would eventually expose a story of money, manipulation, obsession, and betrayal that investigators say unfolded over months behind the walls of a luxurious mansion. What first appeared to be a tragic shooting soon evolved into one of the most talked-about murder conspiracy cases in the country. Prosecutors would later argue that the man at the center of the tragedy never realized the danger surrounding him until it was far too late. By the time the full story emerged, jurors would hear allegations of secret relationships, financial motives, psychological influence, and a carefully crafted plan that ended with a fatal gunshot. Before we continue, make sure you hit the subscribe button and turn on your notifications so you can receive first-hand updates on this story and many others as soon as they happen. To understand how this tragedy unfolded, investigators first had to look back at the life of the victim, Stephen Beard. Long before his name became associated with a high-profile criminal case, Beard had built a reputation as a successful businessman. He served his country during World War II and later established a prosperous career in the broadcasting industry. Through years of hard work, business decisions, and persistence, he accumulated significant wealth. Friends and associates described him as a man who enjoyed the rewards of his success. He owned valuable property, lived comfortably, and had achieved a level of financial security that many people spend their entire lives pursuing. By the time he reached retirement age, Beard had built a fortune that allowed him to enjoy an upscale lifestyle. His financial success provided him with opportunities that many people only dream about. He was known within his community and had developed a life that reflected decades of achievement. However, personal tragedy eventually entered his life when his first wife passed away. The loss reportedly left a significant emotional void. Like many people who experience the death of a longtime spouse, Beard faced loneliness and uncertainty as he attempted to adjust to life without the partner who had shared much of his journey. In the aftermath of that loss, Beard sought companionship. During this period, he met a much younger waitress named Celeste Johnson. Their relationship quickly attracted attention because of the considerable age difference between them. Despite questions from some observers, the relationship progressed, and the two eventually married. To outsiders, it appeared that Beard had found happiness again after enduring the pain of losing his first wife. The marriage offered him companionship and the possibility of a new chapter in life. Yet prosecutors would later argue that beneath the surface, serious problems were already beginning to develop. According to testimony presented years later, financial disagreements emerged within the marriage. Beard's substantial wealth became a source of tension. Witnesses described concerns about spending habits and disagreements involving money. As investigators reconstructed the events leading up to the murder, finances repeatedly surfaced as a central issue. According to court testimony, Celeste allegedly spent large sums of money at a rapid pace. The spending reportedly alarmed Stephen Beard and contributed to growing conflict between the couple. Prosecutors later painted a picture of a marriage increasingly strained by arguments over financial control and access to wealth. What may have appeared to outsiders as ordinary marital disagreements eventually became a significant focus of the criminal investigation. The concerns did not stop there. Beard's adopted daughters would later provide testimony that added another layer to the case. According to accounts presented during legal proceedings, they claimed Celeste openly discussed financial motivations for the marriage. Their statements became important because prosecutors argued they revealed a possible motive behind later events. While defense attorneys challenged aspects of the testimony, investigators considered these claims significant in understanding the dynamics within the household. As the investigation deepened, prosecutors alleged that Celeste's actions became increasingly troubling. Witnesses described allegations that Stephen Beard was secretly being given combinations of alcohol and medication. Testimony suggested that his physical and mental condition may have been affected by substances he did not fully understand he was consuming. These allegations painted a picture of a man becoming increasingly vulnerable while conflicts within the marriage continued to grow. The situation took an unexpected turn when Celeste herself entered psychiatric treatment. During that period, she met another patient named Tracy Tarleton. What began as an acquaintance eventually developed into a close relationship. This connection would later become one of the most important elements of the prosecution's case. According to testimony, Celeste shared deeply personal stories with Tracy. Prosecutors argued that she portrayed herself as a victim trapped in an abusive marriage. These claims allegedly generated sympathy and emotional attachment from Tracy. Over time, investigators believed that Tracy became increasingly invested in Celeste's well-being and increasingly hostile towards Stephen Beard, despite having little direct interaction with him. The prosecution's theory centered on the idea that Celeste carefully influenced Tracy's perception of reality. Jurors heard arguments that Tracy was emotionally vulnerable and susceptible to manipulation. According to prosecutors, Celeste repeatedly reinforced the image of Stephen as a cruel and dangerous husband. Whether every claim was true became a major point of dispute, but prosecutors insisted that the portrayal was designed to motivate someone else to take action on Celeste's behalf. As months passed, investigators argued that those conversations gradually moved beyond complaints and into discussions of eliminating Stephen Beard altogether. Prosecutors claimed that Tracy came to believe she was protecting someone she cared about. The emotional bond between the two women became a key issue throughout the legal proceedings. The conspiracy allegedly reached its climax one night when Tracy Tarleton entered the Beard residence. According to court records and testimony, Stephen Beard was asleep when he was shot. The attack shocked the community and immediately triggered a major criminal investigation. Authorities worked to determine who had entered the mansion, how the crime had been planned, and whether others had been involved. Although Stephen survived the initial shooting, his condition remained serious. He underwent medical treatment and fought to recover from his injuries. For a time, there was hope that he might survive. However, prosecutors later explained that complications related to the gunshot wound continued to affect his health. Months after the attack, Stephen Beard died. His death transformed the case from an attempted murder investigation into a murder prosecution. The lengthy gap between the shooting and Beard's death created complex legal questions. Investigators had to establish that the medical complications leading to his death were directly connected to the gunshot wound. Medical experts provided testimony linking the fatal complications to the injuries he sustained during the attack. This evidence became crucial in establishing criminal responsibility. As authorities gathered witness statements, medical records, financial evidence, and testimony from individuals connected to the case, prosecutors became convinced that the shooting was not an isolated act carried out by a single individual. Instead, they argued that it was the result of a deliberate plan orchestrated behind the scenes. Tracy Tarleton eventually emerged as a central witness whose statements provided investigators with critical details about the alleged conspiracy. Jurors heard extensive testimony regarding conversations, motivations, and actions leading up to the shooting. Prosecutors argued that Celeste never needed to pull the trigger herself because she had persuaded another person to do it. The case became a powerful example of how criminal responsibility can extend beyond the individual who physically commits an act of violence. Throughout the trial, prosecutors focused heavily on motive. They argued that financial gain sat at the center of the conspiracy. Stephen Beard's wealth, estate, and financial resources were repeatedly highlighted as factors that could benefit Celeste after his death. Combined with testimony regarding marital conflicts and spending disputes, prosecutors claimed the evidence pointed toward a calculated effort to remove an obstacle standing between Celeste and greater financial control. The defense challenged many aspects of the prosecution's narrative. Attorneys questioned witness credibility and disputed allegations regarding intent. Nevertheless, prosecutors continued to emphasize the cumulative nature of the evidence. Rather than relying on a single piece of proof, they presented a broad collection of testimony, records, and witness accounts that they argued formed a consistent picture of guilt. Ultimately, jurors were persuaded by that picture. The prosecution successfully convinced them that Celeste had orchestrated the murder plot and manipulated Tracy into carrying out the shooting. Their verdict reflected a belief that the crime was not the product of a spontaneous decision but the culmination of months of planning, influence, and deception. The case continues to be studied because it demonstrates how manipulation can sometimes become as dangerous as direct physical violence. Jurors concluded that influence and persuasion played a critical role in causing a deadly outcome. The story also highlights the powerful role financial incentives can play in complex criminal conspiracies. Investigators repeatedly returned to questions involving money, inheritance, and control of wealth as they worked to understand motive. Another important lesson involves the value of corroborating evidence. Accomplice testimony can be controversial because witnesses may have their own motivations for cooperating with authorities. In this case, prosecutors relied on supporting evidence from multiple sources to strengthen their arguments. The combination of witness accounts, medical findings, financial records, and other evidence helped build a narrative that jurors found credible. The tragedy also illustrates how vulnerable individuals can sometimes be exploited and influenced into committing serious crimes. Prosecutors argued that Tracy Tarleton became emotionally entangled in a situation she did not fully understand and was gradually manipulated into taking irreversible action. Whether viewed through the lens of criminal psychology, financial motive, or interpersonal influence, the case remains a striking example of how human relationships can become dangerous when deception and greed enter the equation. In the end, Stephen Beard's story is not simply about a murder. It is a story about trust, wealth, vulnerability, and the devastating consequences that can arise when personal ambition overrides human life. Investigators pieced together countless small details that might have seemed insignificant on their own. Yet when viewed collectively, those details revealed a pattern that prosecutors argued exposed a carefully planned crime. The verdict ultimately reflected the jury's belief that the evidence told one clear story: a wealthy retiree's life was cut short not by chance, but by a conspiracy driven by manipulation and financial gain. The case remains a powerful reminder that some of the most dangerous threats are not always obvious, and that seemingly minor actions can eventually uncover a far larger and darker plan.